introduce to you Colonel David Patton.
Thank you, Sergeant Major. In the way of preface, I think the Sergeant Major was going to tell you the story that I related to him when I first was commissioned as second lieutenant and became a platoon leader. And not knowing a whole lot about anything in the Army, I had a crusty old platoon sergeant who, when I came in the Army, had about 24, 25, 26 years. And he took me aside, talked to me like a Dutch uncle, and he said, "Lieutenant, I'll make a deal with you. Until I'm satisfied that I think you know what you're doing, so here's the deal. You command the platoon and I'll run it." And being a smart West Point graduate, I allowed as hell that was a pretty good deal. And about 4 months later, he called me aside again and he said, "Okay, Lieutenant, it's all yours." That's why I have a sergeant major like this. Because if sergeant major like Lee Neuenschwander are around, all I have to do is command. He can run it as well as anybody. Distinguished and gallant Vietnam veterans, ladies and gentlemen of the American Legion, distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed an honor and a privilege to appear again here in Porterville on behalf of American veterans, especially those who survived the Vietnam campaigns. I'll talk a little bit about luck, the kind you make for yourself and the pure dumb kind over which none of us has any control. The symbolism of this helicopter as a marker to memorialize our Vietnam veterans is ironic, to say the least. When I think about the fine line between life and death in combat, perhaps no one knows this better than a helicopter pilot. Ask any chopper pilot and he'll tell you that the most important part of the whole mechanism is the Jesus nut. That small part that holds the rotor head to the main shaft and is, by its extremely strategic location, the only thing between all souls on board and Jesus. Should that nut let go, it is reasonably certain that all the former would very quickly meet the latter. You know, we veterans sometimes think of surviving a war in an entirely different way than civilians do. Civilians may say to us, "Oh, how lucky you are to be alive." Well, let me tell you, I could make a very strong case for those who are really lucky, the ones whose existence is now heralded by a simple stone marker. We survivors are left with the legacy of dreams, flashbacks, nightmares, cold sweats, inordinately high divorce rates, and the realization that deep inside we are still fighting every day and every minute of war we have experienced. We still see the faces of those who have died in our arms, pleading for us to work some sort of miracle to keep them from slipping silently, peacefully, sometimes in excruciating agony, into the abyss of death. For others, like Gary Thornton perhaps, who couldn't be with us today, the four walls of a tight cell or the bamboo bars of a tiger cage are repeated memories. Yes, maybe the lucky ones are those who came home in a black rubberized bag or an aluminum box. For them, the war is finally over. But for some of us whom they left behind, the war still rages. We think, what if he had done this? Or what if I had not done that? Was his not coming home my fault? If my love had been stronger, would it have made a difference? Or with respect to those who still live but are no longer with us, could I have understood him a little better so that he would not have left? For some of us, these kinds of memorials keep the war going on. This helicopter, you can see here on this beautiful pedestal, tail number 12189, which is a new tail number but is good enough for future reference, was actually used in Vietnam as a medevac helicopter, or as we used to call them, dust-off. On its refurbishment, the names of many of its crew and passengers were found to have been scratched in many parts of the airframe, dating back as far as 1967. If this old bird could only talk, it could tell us of what the face of war really looked like. They were always a welcome sight, and their pilots were ever intrepid, even bordering on the big brink of lunacy at times based on some of the almost impossible missions they used to fly. I remember the feeling I had after having been wounded in the head after being surrounded for about a month and a half in 1972 near a town called Anlock. Our radio crackled to life with a call. Deadeye Rocket 905, this is Dustoff 15, over. I responded as coherently as my throbbing head would allow. This is 905, watch for my smoke, over. Someone threw a Mark 12 orange smoke. Deadeye Rocket 905, this is Dustoff 15, I roger orange smoke. This is 905, roger, center down on the orange. Well, we weren't the only ones who were watching the dust-off coming in. 15 sat down on the pad at the south side of town, loaded up with 10 soldiers more seriously wounded than I, pulled pitch and started to break out of the landing area. Within seconds, 15 and all its occupants erupted in a fireball and disappeared in a shower of bits and pieces of aluminum, carbon fiber, and honeycomb material. Now, it's not that the dust-off pilot and crew were being so heroic in landing when they did, but rather where they did. For you see, there had been 22 other choppers shot down in almost the exact same spot during the time we had been surrounded. And in spite of that, Dustoff 15 was a dedicated bird with a dedicated crew who, despite the danger of the location, were determined to save life if possible. I might have been luckier had I been aboard that day, but I was condemned to remain surrounded with the mind-numbing, blinding headache, and later the headaches, the bad dreams, cold sweats. So you can see that this kind of bird has a special significance for me, since through pure dumb luck I am here today. I am here today also because when I was finally able to escape Anlock, I made my own luck by forcing the pilot of a similar bird to fly nap of the earth to avoid some deadly enemy ground fire. Yes, I have seen these birds go into a hot LZ over which even the gunships refused to fly. Angels of mercy with rotors instead of wings. What an appropriate memorial to bravery. I can remember also when I finally did return from Vietnam. I arrived in Los Angeles. I was spit on because I was in uniform, bedecked with ribbons and all the other accoutrements of war. But now I can think back and I say, what a sweet victory this is. Another time I rode a dust-off piloted by a man named Onstein, affectionately known by all by the call sign he had emblazoned on the back of his flight helmet just under the Star of David, Super Jew. This man flew that chopper, one of these, into unfamiliar and unsecured terrain and screwed it down through a postage stamp-sized hole in the jungle canopy to pick up wounded soldiers at dusk. Then, having done so, just as adroitly pulled pitch back through that same tiny orifice in the canopy without so much as striking a leaf with the rotor. Because of his unselfish heroism, or lunacy if you will, all the wounded lived to fight another day. I am told there is only one other location in the United States that has a helicopter as part of its Vietnam Veterans Memorial, and that place is in Texas. Well, Texas, you don't have anything on Porterville. I am proud to be a veteran,